Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Jean, and I'm a field crops educator with Michigan State University Extension, and I am your host today. So welcome to Virtual Breakfast, and thanks for joining us. So today is our hot topic one. We've got Keith on to kind of prime the pump, but we also want to give you guys lots of time to go ahead and submit what's currently going on in your area and what you would like answered. So a little bit more time than usual, actually. I'm going to stop sharing, Keith. If you don't mind, this is your time to take over.
Okay, all right. It looks like I'm unmuted. Are you seeing my screen just before I prattle on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. So I coordinate the EnviroWeather program, and I wanted to show you a little bit about our website today. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to go fast and try to just highlight a few models here and some general concepts. But our homepage has, like most MSU websites, it's got a menu across the top that you can use to navigate the website. And you don't need to actually log into the website. You can create a free account with an email, and that allows you to customize the website quite a bit. So I definitely recommend that. But you can get through the website without doing any kind of or without setting up an account. You just won't have all the functions really, or all the special functions. So we're divided up into menus on our website. There's a big weather menu that has a bunch of summary or degree day tools or precipitation tools. I'm just going to show you right now the latest observations map, because this has a bunch of weather information kind of all gathered into one spot. It's essentially the map of our network, which, you know, is all the stations are denoted by dots here. And when you click on a dot, it actually brings up the current information for that station, the last collected information. And then what we've added to this card now to make it a little more functional is forecast information. So you can use this for point type forecast for the area of the weather station to get National Weather Service forecasts here, both in pictorial or in kind of this graphical form. So those are very handy tools for looking out in the future, and this is really the best forecast information we have. There's also a link to the most current data, or in 5-minute increments, on the Go to Mediagram tab, which is something that Jeff does show quite often in his talks here, because it does pack a bunch of information in graphical form if you like to take your information that way. I am going to log in just very quickly here just to show you the dashboard, which is one of the major features that we have when you do get an account. And the dashboard really is just a place where you can bookmark all the models and weather stations that you'll normally use. And whenever you're logged in, dashboard is up on the top of the screen, so you can always click to it and then get to all the links for the important information. So I'll just do that, and it's in 3 sections. It's your stations, your crop models, and then any weather models that we have here. So basically all the pest and crop models are going to be divided up by crops as well. So so this is kind of the handy space where you can keep some of your models. But let's just kind of go back and navigate the website a little bit. I did want to show you guys the crops menu, which is basically just listings of different categories of crops, field crops, vegetables, fruit, and then we have kind of a landscape section as well. But each crop has its own little icon, so we can go over here to corn. And I wanted to show you a handy tool, especially this year, is looking at evapotranspiration and development. So this is the corn potential evapotranspiration tool, where you can choose a weather station, one that you're normally interested in your area where you farm. And then you can select how you measure maturity in the crop, whether that's with days or with growing degree days. And usually, on your seed, there'll be a, 1100 degree day corn, or I probably have that number wrong, but you can change that into, we're just going to use that here. And then you can set the emergence date of the corn so that it tracks based on this information, kind of shows you the percent of the season that's completed. Obviously, this is contrived, but it is a handy tool for looking at daily potential evapotranspiration. So today is Thursday. All these green bars here are forecasts, and that's the same throughout our website. But we can see that we're going to essentially lose about 0.2 or 0.2 inches of rainfall, so 0.2 of an inch, or of evapotranspiration, and we're not getting that there. So that really gives you a little bit about the deficit of rainfall and to inform it when you might need to irrigate. And there is also a soy version of this one. Let me just check time here real quick. So I'll just pop this up. Oop, my mouse is sticky this morning.
I'd say you've got 5 more minutes, Keith. Maybe a little bit
Okay,
less
all
than
right.
that.
Good. All right. Well, then I'll just show the corn tool here, which again, we don't have degree dates, or excuse me, this is the soy potential evapotranspiration, but it's the same principle. So it's going to be measuring the time to maturity here, just in days is the only option that we have. But it does track in a similar way evapotranspiration that's occurring at different sites. So this is, these are tools to kind of inform where we're going through the season, so that we can kind of monitor progression of the crop. There are also, I think seed corn maggot was another model that Chris had mentioned was useful for her.
Yes.
It might be a little bit late in the season, but anyway, to remind you guys about this. But again, I can point out that these models do have a bit of description on how, kind of the biology of the pest, and then how you can run the model. But this is a very simple model. It does a lot of work for you. You just plug in the date that you're interested in, hit submit, and then it generates a table that's colorful, and the highlights do tell you something. Blue means that particular stage is complete. So we're looking here, we're basically done with emergence. It looks like we've got a little bit more of adult flight and egg laying, which is you see here that it's giving you the start date, and then whether it's expected to continue, or the date that you would expect it to end. And then we'd expect to see peak flight here around the 13th. And so these are highlighted not in blue because they're still active, and the red is the current state that we're at, and then yellow is where we'll be in a week's time, since we can use forecast information to kind of project where we'll be.
I think Chrissy had mentioned it's actually quite accurate, actually.
Right,
there.
exactly. Yeah, so that's what we strive for. And if if folks see different things, obviously we'd like to know that. I mean, it's hard to get every situation. There are microclimates in Michigan that we have to deal with, but that's certainly something that EnviroWeather can help with a bit.
That's great. I don't know, Chris, if you have any comments you'd like to make about insects or about the tool. I know Chris is actively moving, so we wanted to see if she had anything to add, and maybe she can come back later though, because
nope.
you're there. Okay.
I was taking my cable box apart. Yeah, so some of those, there's not a lot of tools on there for insects, but the seed corn maggot one has been pretty useful. And then the corn borer one, there's so few corn borers, I don't know the accuracy of that, but I have to think it's pretty accurate.
Awesome. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Chris, for jumping on. Do you have any other comments about, I think we have some questions coming up later, but thanks for jumping on right now. Keith, did you have anything else you wanted to show real quick? I think we're gonna move into
Yeah,
our open.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm going to stick around. So if folks have
Awesome.
more questions or they want to see stuff, I'll pop this up again. So let me
Yeah, I wanted to
stop sharing.
mention, that there is a little bit of a cool thing you've started or would like to start, and that is, depending on the weather station you have, we have the capabilities of connecting farmers into the EnviroWeather hub. I don't know what to call it. You could probably do a better job. Just mentioning it really
Sure.
quick.
Sure, and yeah, the microclimates in Michigan are what keyed this basically, because EnviroWeather stations are set at a permanent location that may be more than a mile, 5-10 miles away from where you farm. So the conditions there might not mirror exactly the conditions that you have. But a lot of growers have these personal or kind of consumer grade weather stations from Davis or from Spectrum, Hobo, or other companies. We are building a system to get that data from the web service that those stations report to, and then draw that through EnviroWeather, just like an EnviroWeather station. So it would be much more location specific, and we hope that this is going to improve management, but we are looking for some volunteers. And what I'll do is I'll put my my contact information in the chat here. If you do have a weather station, it might be one of the brands that we're looking at. We still haven't fully built the system, but we are making some progress to start building stuff in. So we're hoping to show this off this summer, or perhaps kind of in the fall and winter meetings.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you
But
back
yeah,
on here. It sounds great.
excellent. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That would be great. Yep. Thank
Okay.
you very much for mentioning that.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And with that, we are going live now. To the question period. We've had quite a few questions put in, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started into them. I hope the specialists are ready. First one's coming up is for Kurt. I heard a comment that maybe receiving sulfur from the Canadian smoke.
Hey, Monica.
Hey.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, so sulfur dioxide is a byproduct of the combustion process. Now, sulfur dioxide is not immediately available to the plant, but the key is it can oxidize quite quickly to sulfate sulfur. The one problem is sulfur dioxide is actually quite soluble in water, the one thing we don't have right now. So as that smoke comes over Michigan, you could get some sulfur dioxide deposition from that smoke onto the field. Once we get a little bit of rainfall, that then can become available to that plant. So that would be the one limiting factor right now. One thing I do want to bring up with regards to the sulfur, since we're on here this morning, that is probably one of the more common deficiencies we're seeing right now on corn across the state. And again, that would be even in areas that have received sulfate sulfur. Again, the big problem is you got to get that sulfate moving to the plant. We don't have much water in that upper root zone. We don't have an established root system. So if you did apply sulfate sulfur this spring, hang tight. Once that root system can maybe grow a little bit more and tap into some of that, and we get a little bit of precipitation, we should have some access to that sulfate sulfur.
What would the comments, I know there'd be some similarities, but there also be some differences around nitrogen.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of N deficiency now too. So both sulfate and nitrate are anions, so they're not relatively absorbing to cation exchange sites, right? Because they're an anion and they move in water. The problem is we don't have water to move them to the plant. So sit tight. Hopefully with Jeff's forecast, we can get ½ to 1 inch of rain here and things be looking much better. But there's multiple nutrient deficiencies we're seeing show up A little bit in wheat, a little bit more in corn, not so much in soybean yet. And a lot of that little drink of water will take care of a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Kurt. We also have some comments on here. Christy, I think I don't know if you've happened to see a couple, but there's one about cockleburs. I'm sure you probably have been hearing about escapes, not just cockleburs for an escape. Do you have any comments?
Sure, and I think that one is particular for sweet corn. There is a MSU vegetable guide that kind of gives you some different options for weed control in sweet corn. The one thing I would say is I do see that you've been using Basagran with non-extractant. Maybe try to switch that up to crop oil concentrate. Usually Basagran works better with that. Another option to do is maybe switch to another post herbicide. There's some of the HPPD inhibitors, some things like Lotus or Impact or Amazon that can be used with some sweet corn varieties. Just double check your sweet corn hybrid and make sure that they're not sensitive to those herbicides. So there's a few other options out there for those escapes. Monica, also, as you mentioned, there's quite a few escapes because we have been dry, so that herbicide that we put on pre-emergence, not all of it has been incorporated into the soil with rainfall. We are still seeing benefits of those pre-herbicides. I've went out and I've looked at a lot of our trials, and it's not 100%, but we are reducing some of those populations. Those residual herbicides are still going to be out there. A lot of them are not what we would consider. A lot of people think they're like photodegraded and stuff, but that's only just certain chemistries. So we'll get some residual control of new weeds that have not emerged once we get some rainfall to get those herbicides into that seed emergence zone. So
Someone also asked if it takes weeks to activate the pre-emergent chemical, does that also extend the rotational restriction window for that product?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing to think about in our dry conditions, look at those rotational restrictions on many of those products. We actually have seen a little bit of carryover this year from some Callisto from some of the dry weather last year with some of the higher use rates, particularly in soils that are lower pH. So just keep that in mind, especially when you start thinking about which ones have those longer rotation restrictions. So they might hold on a little bit longer, particularly if we have a lot of times, most of those labels say something like 15 inches of rain. So if we're low throughout the season, that's going to potentially be an issue next year.
All right, so check the label and see what the restrictions are with the amount of rainfall you should have. Okay. If a pre-emergent herbicide was not applied, should or can I apply a product like Dual to be added to the post-spraying soybeans to have late residual control?
Definitely, that's a good option to do, is put some of those laybys, whether it's a Dual, a Warrant, Outlook, Zidua, some of those can be applied post-emergence with many of your corn or soybean herbicides, gives you some residual control, particularly if we get some rainfall later on, and things like water hemp, which we're seeing a lot more of, really starting to see that potentially have a little bit of emergence in the last week or so. But I think once we get some rain, where those spots where water hemp is present is going to be there. So, some of those applications before potentially we get this rain would be great.
All right. And I got one last one for you, Christy. Are you are you good?
Sure.
All right. Can Prowl and Dual be put on a field for dry beans and not be incorporated for a few days until closer to planting?
Personally, I would go ahead and incorporate it. Prowl's one of those ones that it's probably not going to lose much, but with those particular ones, you probably could wait a little bit. But if you're throwing something like an Eptam or one of those other ones, it could be a problem. But I would probably get it incorporated closer or as soon as possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Christy, for all the questions there. I just fired at you. I appreciate it. There was a comment or a question about using in the EnviroWeather station and some of the steps and how it works from Eric. And Keith got on and mentioned there was a little bit of a bug and he was working on that, but it also looks like, Keith, I did paste in your contact information. I just wanted to mention if people have questions or concerns around using and setting up the stations, you are the guy. so that they're welcome to reach out to you.
Yep. That I know who to talk to if I can't answer the question. So yep, absolutely. Thanks.
Awesome. And we did have a question about weather. Let me see it. And I don't know, Keith, I'm hoping you can answer it, but if not, that's okay too. Is there any correlation between Great Lakes ice minimums like this year and drought conditions the following year in Michigan?
Well, in full disclosure, I am an entomologist, so weather
Yeah.
isn't necessarily my my specialty. But to me, I mean, ice on the lakes. I've always thought about slowing down the spring, the start of spring, basically. High ice on the lake will do that. I think the relationship to drought is in the opposite direction, that it'll be the level of the lake that we would see getting lower in the warm season in drought years, basically. So I'm not sure that the lake ice actually would be directly related.
Okay.
It might be if the lake levels are higher, but yeah,
Yeah.
but it is out of my purview, but that's just kind of the way it seems.
Okay. I thought you weren't you're not Jeff, I guess is but I thought I'd give it a try, Keith. So thank you.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, I could substitute for my boss in entomology, but I can do it for Jeff. That's
fair. So,
right.
Dan, I'll say that if you want to go ahead and private message me your email or contact information, I'd be happy to forward this to Jeff so he could give you a response. All right. And then there was also a question submitted about plant skid, asking if anyone's ever used it. Yes, we've done research on it. I went ahead and submitted a response to the grant summary that we gave back to soybean, because they so graciously did fund that project. Plant skid can be an effective product. I also have trialed it on dry beans. I would say the break-even cost was much more favorable on dry beans, but there's some perimeter spraying that can be recommended. We found much more luck in spraying the whole field. It is difficult to manage. There are some other products out there that are much easier. They come mixed, ready to go. Plant skid does have a little bit of a process to it. And so that's one disadvantage that I would just point out. So I'm not sure what crops you're spraying on there, but you might want to take a look at the cost and if that would work out for you depending on the type of damage you typically see. And you're also welcome to reach out to me or James DeDecker if you have any other concerns or questions. All right, I see that we are moving in. Oh, we've got a question. Actually, Clay, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I think you have. What's going on?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was listening to a webinar from the East Coast, I believe it was Cornell. They were saying that the active ingredient is lanolin, and they're successful in just buying lanolin and making a solution that's a lot less expensive than the product that was mentioned.
And plant skid?
Yep. The active ingredient in Plantscape apparently is lanolin. That's coming from wool. I do know that chestnut growers, they'll put it on their trees in their orchard to keep year away while the trees are young.
Oh, I'm looking it up quick, but I'm pretty sure the active ingredient in plant skid, the reason it works is it's blood-based. It does have a label. Yep, it's dried blood is the active ingredient. It's porcine and bovine. I think it's even OMRI approved. I know there's some other ones that are, but it does have a good label on it. I don't want to say things that are wrong, so please check the label. There are some other products though that are stinky and hot, and then I've also heard from people, Clay, that you can take capsicum and just put it on instead of buying that hot product, right? So yes, I guess it's like some of these active ingredients you can go ahead and just maybe purchase bulk and mix some things up on your own. One nice thing is the convenience; these are already mixed, and also some of them already have a label and they've been tested. And some of them you can add in to a tank mix. Some of them you can't. So just make sure you're looking at the label. Thank you, Clay. Okay. And yeah, since this is open period, you are welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself like Clay did. We have some other questions coming in. Some cornfields are approaching V5, V6, and side dressing has begun. Kurt, we're back to you. What are your recs for surface applied and knifed in applications, even with this dry soil conditions? And I was going to ask, because of the dry soil conditions of you, maybe what you applied in the spring, what have we lost? Have we lost? And should we kind of be building in a little bit more nitrogen into some later applications to make up for that?
That's a great question. So, if you applied early in the season, really early, I think a lot of us have forgotten now that I think good chunk of the state up through about April 5th or 6th was the wettest year we've had on record. And so if you applied prior to that, we might have some loss issues. If you applied after that, likely you will have very little loss issues because of how dry it's been. So I have seen some side dress rigs going across some fields. Corn looks, pretty resilient right now. So as far as adjusting rates, I would hesitate at this point in time, simply because corn doesn't look that bad, right? A lot of us got in on time and emerged pretty well. We have the stand, and it is a C4 species, so it does pretty well under some of these warmer conditions. With regards to moving forward with side dressing right now, remember, if you're going with a surface application and you don't get it on before this next rain, you may want to consider a urease inhibitor. The other issue at hand here would be, even if you inject into the soil, that coulter inject slit without rainfall can remain open. And yes, you can lose some N out of that slit. Now, typically when you concentrate N in a band or in a slit, something like that, you tend to increase the likelihood of uptake and some of the efficiency. So you might negate some of the loss in that manner. So those would be the two big things. There's a lot of unknowns now. I think looking at Jeff's recording, we might get a little rain coming up here, and then after that, we could be in a dry stretch. So, the big thing is we could get that positional unavailability of nitrogen. If you surface apply it and it stays on the surface, so we don't get enough sufficient rainfall to work it down to that root system, it may not be available to that plant. We've run into that a couple times over the last 5 or 6 years. But big thing is, if you go with a surface application, you may want to consider a urease inhibitor. Bear in mind, however, that only buys you another 10 to 14 days, depending on what strength of product you use. So there could be some issues longer term beyond that.
Yeah, there was a couple more comments or questions on what you said there. Does thiazole with 28 prevent some loss?
Yep, so thiazole has some urease inhibitor properties. How, we don't really know very well. It is not as effective as a urease inhibitor. Does it have some protection? Yes. Is it a true urease inhibitor? No, it is not. But there are some inhibition properties there. Yes.
Awesome. And then Mike was wondering brand names of urease inhibitors.
Oh, so brand names of urease inhibitors. So, you'll be looking at a lot of the NBPT type products out there. Take a look at percent active ingredient. So since NBPT came off patent, there's a lot of generic products out there. One of the big differences, look at the percent AI. You might see different percentages ranging anywhere from maybe 1 to 2%, all the way up to 24, 25, 26%. That can play a big difference or a big role in how effective some of these products are.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kurt. What I want to make sure is, okay, there's one more follow-up. Adding products like boosts or Hume to 28 to help from losing nitrogen. Are those any of them that you're familiar with there, Kurt?
Yeah, we've worked with a couple of those products. We have not seen the greatest results. A lot of my colleagues have not seen the greatest results with some of those products. Again, I probably wouldn't use some of those products across your entire field. Strip them out so you can gauge going into next year whether they worked or they did not work.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. If you need any help with that, right? Like getting a research project set up, reach out to your local extension educator.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure that we give a couple of our specialists some time to give updates, like Kim Cassida. I'd love to hear about forage for a second and see if you've got some updates, especially around the pest pressure we've got going on. How's it going there, Kim? I can see you.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yes.
Oh, thing off pause, I guess. We definitely have some pests out there. I have heard some reports that people are still fighting alfalfa weevils in their second cut regrowth. That does sometimes happen. The weevils seem to have been late this year with their life cycle. So be sure that you are monitoring for that because they can cause a lot of damage in small plants in regrowth.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue that we're already seeing, well, we're right on schedule for potato leaf hopper, but they have been here a little bit longer than they normally have. And again, with slow regrowth due to the lack of water, beware that the damage threshold for leaf hoppers is less when the plant is smaller. So it doesn't take very many of them to really set back your yield. So monitor those and be ready to do something.
Awesome.
Another question that I've gotten from a number of different people relates to the low rainfall. People are wondering whether it's even worth it to go in and cut their hay for first cut if it is not looking very good. The thing to remember there is that once those plants have reached the flowering stage of maturity, so if it's alfalfa, if it's actually started to flower, or if it's a grass, if it's headed out, that plant has already returned everything it's going to return back to its root in terms of regenerating its root reserves. So you're not helping the plant any by not cutting those about to die shoots and tillers. So really the best thing for you to do as a producer is to, as long as it's economical to actually go over the field, is to go ahead and cut that first cutting, and that will reset your plants waiting for that rain so that hopefully our second and subsequent cuttings will come in. And those plants, provided we get the rain, they'll recover. Perennial plants are pretty tough. As long as you've taken care of the roots up to this point, as Jeff mentioned earlier, we still have good subsoil moisture. So they've got the roots down there in the water. They're just waiting for a little bit better conditions. And as far as yields go, it's been all over the place around the state with first cutting. I've heard of some parts of the state, the southern part in some areas, and the thumb where yields are ending. Our variety test yields here on campus were really impressive this year. But I know there are other parts of the state, particularly as you go farther north, where it's starting to look a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep in mind that with forage crops, we have a lot more opportunities for cuttings to come later in the year. It's not a one shot and you're done thing.
Okay.
So we're just going to hope that that forecast will turn around. And right now there's still a fair amount of hay left over from last year that's moving. So we're not in a hay shortage situation yet, but we do need that rain.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Kim, thank you so much for giving us an update on forages. I really appreciate it. And I would say I've been getting a lot of comments about the pest pressure in the hay crop around St. John's. So it's definitely a problem. Yeah. There was one question if there's research on the use of stovercal on sorghum baleage. Do you know of any, Kim?
I thought I was done.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Then I had to unmute again. I have not heard of that product.
Okay.
So I cannot comment.
Sorry, Clyde. But if you want to give us your information, we could.
Yeah, we can.
Yep. Yeah.
We can look it up.
All right. Next. Oh, Dennis, I'm about to come to you anyways. I was hoping for a wheat update. So you go right ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Monica. I've had a lot of questions about how much the heat and drought stress is causing yield reductions in wheat. And Honestly, it kind of depends on where you are and how severe it is, and it also depends on the growth stage on the wheat. Pollination is a very important time. So the high temperatures that we had last week did cause some problems for wheat that was flowering then. Pollen begins forming about 5 to 7 days before you start to see the anthers extruding out the glues on the central part of the head. So the high temperatures, if you're starting to form pollen, can reduce pollen formation, which basically you end up with no seeds in that spikelet. So there's this, most of the southern part of the state is beyond flowering at this point. There is flowering is still going on in some parts of the thumb, and then a little further north of like say up toward north of 46 and up into US 10 and whatnot. So those that are flowering after the high temperatures will have less issues, and those that flowered ahead of the high temperatures will have less issues. But the lack of moisture is really having an impact on lighter textured soils. The wheat is basically stunted, and the flag leaves are curling up, and just without some rain, those we're really significantly hurting yield in some of those areas. But the bulk of the state, there's enough subsoil moisture yet to keep that crop alive. So we need this rain that Jeff was talking about. So if we can get that, we may be okay. But if it continues dry, we're going to see some yield reductions for sure.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dennis. We do have a question for you here.
Sure.
How much nitrogen per acre does wheat need to finish out from full flower into flowering through grain fill?
Flowering through grain fill, the nitrogen uptake is less. The rapid uptake of nitrogen occurs during stem elongation. So we're beyond the rapid uptake phase at this point. I don't have a number off the top of my head as far as how much nitrogen is needed. I don't know if Kurt, if you have any idea about that or not, but yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay. I don't know if Kurt might have. I'd also say, Joe, if you have some direct questions you'd like, you're happy to share, private message me, or probably me. It sounds like Dennis is like on his phone and then we can get you connected to help with your recommendation there. Okay, that's all I have for questions for you right now, Dennis. Thank you so much for giving us an update on weed. And yeah, I really hope we get some rain soon. We had some really beautiful looking weed, and it's a bummer watching it.
Yep, I agree. Yep.
Yeah. Clay, I saw you put your hand up there quick. Did you have another question or comment? Give you a second. Okay.
No, I saw a hand up. I guess it was someone else's hand. Sorry.
It's okay. Just making sure. All right. We do have a couple more questions that have come in. Of course, we go as long as the questions go. So, but I do want to make sure we have time for Lyndon Kelly or Young Suck to make some comments on irrigation. So I'm going to hold the couple we have here and just see Lyndon or Young Suck, if you have anything irrigation related you'd like to give an update on.
Monica, I can talk to you unless Young Suck jumps right in. I'm looking for him to say yes or no.
Well, Lyndon, go ahead. Maybe I can add.
Yeah. So I think the big message is if you've got irrigation, use it. Most of the questions we're getting right now are in the area of using irrigation to help germination. That was a couple weeks ago. Now we're talking about incorporating herbicides and fertilizers. And those are tremendous advantages to the individual for the economics and the crop, but also to the environment, because then we're getting the use of those herbicides, or we're avoiding the volatilization of that nitrogen. So there's an article, I'll snap something into the chat that has some notes, that has some links. There's an article that I dug up from 2012. You remember that 2012 year? We learned a lot from that year. and about aiding germination and incorporating nitrogen. Some people are talking about the issue of irrigation scheduling, and it comes in two worlds. If you've kept up on things and there's soil moisture and you didn't lose your soil moisture to a cover crop that you terminated late, or a lot of tillage that happened that burnt up or lost the soil moisture before your crop was planted, then all we're doing is we're trying to keep up with the removal of the plant. Corn and soybeans are right in that 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch a week right now. They're using about a half of what our reference ET is. Forage crops and alfalfa, we're using that full ET number plus a little, that reference ET number that Jeff gives you, plus about 5%. So our removals in wheat and alfalfa, if we haven't taken a cutting, are 1.5 to 1 3/4 of an inch. So we're burning through the soil moisture pretty quick if you're not replacing it. So those are sort of the big messages that are there. A few calls coming in about adding irrigation. I want to warn people, when you start trying to add irrigation this late in the season, the history has been that by the time you get it to function, it's too late. But I'm glad to talk to people about it. I'm glad to talk to people about the registration process that's required and the economics. And I'll snap into this chat a couple links that will help people, I think.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Lyndon. And Youngsuck, I know you wanted to say something quick. I also want to point out there was a question that came in. If you wanted to answer it in your spiel there, and it's about how deep will 1 inch rain irrigation application go in different soil types, assuming completely dry soils.
Sure. Before I answer the question, maybe I'll just add one more thing. If you're double cropping the winter wheat, like with soybean, it's important to make sure you maintain the optimal soil moisture for the second crop for quick germination emergence. So keep that in mind. The 1 inch irrigation application, it really, like Eric mentioned, it really depends on the soil type. But for if you have Astamo and Spink, the 1 inch may go down to like from 8 to 12 inch ish. So if you want to just wet the soil top 6 inches, maybe 1/2 inch or 3/4 might be good if you have the Astamo or Spink soil. But we have a little more information about this on one of the extension bulletins, so I'll put in the chat the link.
All right. Okay, that is what we have for irrigation, folks. We are needing to wrap it up here, but there was a couple questions that came in and I would like to honor them, get them answered if we can. Kurt, there was a question about Pivot Bio. I think in the past you've mentioned products like that aren't particularly effective, but I'll let you make the comment. Does Pivot Bio really help corn with nitrogen?
Yep, I already responded. I think there was 2 questions in the chat. I responded directly to.
Oh, you did? Okay.
whoever
I don't
asked.
see
Yep.
that on here, but thank you. Okay. And then
Kurt, I would like to hear what your answer is though too. So go ahead and answer for everyone.
Sure. We have not seen positive responses to that specific product or similar products. Many of my colleagues around the upper Midwest have not seen positive responses to those products. But again, trial it out on your own field, do it in strips. And the one big thing to make sure is that all of your N rates are not above optimal, right? If you want to save X units of N, you have to have N rates below what your optimal N rate will be to compare to. So that would be the big take home point. We also have a bulletin out on our website, soil.msu.edu, that details some of the results across about 12 upper Midwest states.
It's a great read. Okay. There was also questions up about herbicides and potato control, but Christy, I know that's not the crop you usually work on, and I don't see our other specialist on. So I think at this point, if you want to shoot us an email with that potato questions, I can connect you with the right what person we have for that. But we're going to wrap it up. So thank you everyone for joining the live Q&A. We appreciate it. Again, next week, we have Mike Staten on talking about soybeans. So if you can join us for that, that'd be great. And we appreciate you getting on. Have a wonderful day.